What's up everyone, and welcome back to my channel. It has been a hot minute since I have sat down and filmed a video for you all, but I did recently get my film scans back from my lab this morning, and that is kind of the basis for this entire video. So today's video is going to be all about Kodak Gold 200 and give my honest thoughts on it from the first two rolls I have shot with it. So that is kind of my disclaimer. I've only shot 2 rolls of film with this film stock, but I do feel like I covered a variety of different scenarios and environments and scenes in those 2 rolls that I kind of have a general idea of what the film stock is like. Now that being said, if I say anything in this video that you disagree with, be sure to let me know down below. I would be happy to chat and discuss our experiences with this film stock. First things first, Kodak Gold does have a box speed of 200. So if you are new to film photography or manual photography in general, the ISO or the box speed is going to be how sensitive your film is to light. So the lower the number, the less sensitive it is to light. And then if you go up, say you're using something like Portra 800, that's what a lot of people will use in darker situations because it's going to be more sensitive to light and pick up light easier. If you are new to my channel or even the film photography world, 400 is a very common box speed for people to use, and it's actually what I've found highly recommended as a very versatile box speed. So chances are your situation is going to work well with a box speed of 400 and you'll be able to capture a variety of differently lit situations on a box speed of 400. So with Kodak Gold, you're definitely getting a little bit into the lower end of the ISO numbers, and typically when I see something like an ISO of 200, I'm gonna stick to more well-lit situations to shoot that film stock in. That being said, I've found that box speeds of 400 still do very well in very well-lit situations. You just have to make sure you're not letting in as much light when it comes to aperture and shutter speed. So I do want to preface with that and go into how I feel about 200. So 200 as the box speed is kind of a hard and fast fact. It's just 200. And so something that I noticed is that I don't actually shoot with an ISO of 200 very often, and I find that especially with film, my favorite film stock, Portra 400, is a box speed of 400, and like I mentioned, it has worked in pretty much every situation that I've needed it to work in. So I don't typically reach for something like a 200. When it comes to some of these photos that you're gonna see, they were shot in a variety of different lighting situations. Some of them were shot on a very bright day after a snowstorm back in December. So not only was the sun really shining down on the ground, but it was actually being reflected back up by all of the snow that was on the ground. So that was a super well lit situation that I was shooting in. And then there's a hike that I did with my parents, and this was when we were actually coming back down the mountain, and we went up around 3 p.m. and we were starting to come down probably around 3:45, 4 p.m. The sun was starting to get lower in the sky, and we were slowly getting into golden hours. So that's also another situation that I have shot this in. Another lighting situation also on that same second roll was when we were inside making food. So it was all artificial, very yellow lighting, and it was a bit on the darker side. And then lastly is the morning after, and that was shot outside in the morning, but it was overcast. So it was cloudy, the sunlight was being diffused by the clouds, even though it was in the morning, so there was a little bit more sunlight than even the hike. It wasn't as bright simply because of the cloudiness. A variety of different lighting situations, and I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I would have except for the super bright sunny day. When it was snowy, I would have preferred something like an Ultramax 400 or a Portra 400 for the other three situations. So I'm not a huge fan of the 200. That's nothing against the film stock itself. That's simply just the box speed, and that's simply just the type of film photographer I am, I guess. So the next thing that I've noticed about Kodak Gold is it's super warm. And this is not a surprise, or at least it shouldn't be, because it's called Kodak Gold. So in general, one thing that I learned pretty early on in my film photography journey is that you can tell what the film stock undertones and general tones are going to look like based on the color of the box. So pretty much all of the Kodak film stocks that I've used, Ultramax, Portra, and Kodak Gold, are all yellow slash gold-ish boxes and containers, and so that is definitely a good, pretty accurate indicator of the fact that Kodak film stocks, or at least those three, are pretty warm in general. That being said, Kodak Gold is significantly warmer than the other two. And one thing that I've noticed is that Portra 400 will still even pick up like the blueness of a sky, and Kodak Gold just kind of undoes it. And some people are into that, but all throughout high school when I edited like Instagram photos to post, I always leaned more towards cool tones. And it wasn't until I started shooting Portra 400 where I was like, oh hey, the warm tones are actually kind of nice. However, that leads into my next thing that I've noticed about some of these images is that when I shot Kodak Gold in the winter after the snowstorm, when everything was super white and bright, I noticed that there was just what felt like a filter over my images that I took. And this was probably made more obvious by the fact that there was snow on the ground, and the snow is like very white, like my shirt, but it picked up very warm on camera, and so everything in those images just looks super warm. Even the street, and I'll insert a picture of like what I took with my iPhone versus what was picked up by the film stock. Even like the road was more dark and definitely like pretty black in real life because the ground was like super wet from the snow. But then in the film stock, it gets washed out quite a bit. So that, I think that role, because all of the images were really like that, I just wasn't a fan of. I thought I would never shoot Kodak Gold again, but I still ended up taking it out with me last weekend when I was with my parents and decided, hey, I'm just gonna give it another shot. I ended up taking it out on the hike and around my mom's garden in the backyard, and it really did pick up the greens very nicely. And I think part of that is because of the warm undertones of just like the foliage and nature, and the fact that I wasn't really blatantly shooting the sky. So a lot of what was getting picked up on camera were like greens and browns. And I almost found that it allowed them to look even more saturated and luscious and just really, really pretty compared to the snow pictures. So the last thing I do want to talk about with the film stock is just the price. When it comes to shooting film, price is definitely going to play a role into it because you have to pay for every single roll. So I do want to touch upon that real quick because there is definitely a big price gap between some of these film stocks. As of a few hours ago, I checked on Amazon, and one roll of Kodak Gold is gonna run about $7. It was like 21 something for a pack of 3, so roughly $7 for each roll. With Ultramax that I ordered about a week ago, it ran me $8 per roll, pretty much. I think it was like $25 for a pack of 3 as well, so a little over $8. And then lastly, Portra 400, I just checked earlier today as well, and that is about $53 per 5 rolls. So that's gonna run you a little over $10 per roll. So you're looking at a $7 per roll film stock with Kodak Gold versus a $10 per roll film stock with Portra 400. In my opinion, there is definitely a big difference in me preferring the look of the Portra 400. So I don't want to say it's necessarily quality, but there's definitely a difference. However, it's a big difference, like $3 difference per roll when you're looking at things that are $7 and $10. is a very large difference, and that's a very large price gap when you multiply it multiple times if you're buying multiple rolls at once. So it's definitely a consideration, but that leads me into kind of the summary and how I feel about the film stock. If it were me, if I wanted a cheap film stock, I would still go for Ultramax. I think at $8 a roll versus $7 a roll, I do prefer the images that I get from Ultramax. I think it's worth the extra dollar per roll to shoot Ultramax. And especially with the 400 ISO versus the 200 ISO. So those are my thoughts. Even though Kodak Gold is not my favorite of the three, I still absolutely loved the way that my most recent images turned out. I'm a big fan of them, and honestly, they look very similar to the Portra 400 ones I shot on the same hike, so I'm very pleasantly surprised with that. But if you guys have any tips or tricks that maybe I was not aware of, let me know down below what your thoughts are, if you're a fan of Kodak Gold or not, because I would definitely love to just hear different opinions and thoughts. So if you guys did enjoy this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you're interested on more content like this on film photography or digital photography, that is what my YouTube channel is all about. So be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss future videos. And I will see you all in the next one.